This is going to be the first in a series of videos that look at the more advanced features of the RoseEngine plugin for the LatheEngraver. And we're going to start this video with looking at the settings for the plugin. So if we click the settings wrench there, and under plugins here we have RoseEngine, we can see all of the global settings that we have for this. There are always some developmental features or experimental features which are not shown by default. So if you click this button right here and then click save, once you reload the page, you'll see all of the available features for the plugin. Now, one of the important things under this control options here, this sort of describes how the plugin works. So my goal for this was not to make just a machine that reads G-code that's planned out in advance, but instead you get real-time control of the machine, or I should say close to real-time control of the machine. So this is not how most CNC machines work. So what's happening in this case is that we tell the A-axis how much it's going to rotate per command, and you can always hover over these buttons to give you a little bit more information about these, and then it will send those commands in various chunk sizes, in this case with half-degree rotations of the A-axis and 5 commands sent at a time. This seems to be a pretty reasonable amount for this. Now, one of the things that we have to be careful of is that even if we send these commands in chunk sizes, if we send these all at once, it's just going to fill up the buffer on the board and it'll just run all of those commands before we can inject something else. So we actually monitor the buffer on the board, and what this effectively says is that assuming a default of 100 buffer positions on the board, that it won't send any commands if it's under 80. So it has to be 80 or above before it'll send any more commands. And it also tries to calculate the time when the next chunk of commands will be sent, and that's what this millisecond threshold is. So if it's within 10 milliseconds of that calculated time and that buffer's below this or above this value, then it'll send those commands. One of the things that when you inject a command in, it will go at whatever speed the rest of the machine is moving, and sometimes you want to slow that down. So this is an injected command divisor. So as you can read here in the bubble overlap, it just divides whatever that feed rate is by this number so that it kind of slows down any of those injected commands. By default, anytime you inject a command, it gets shown as a little pop-up, and you can turn that off if for some reason you don't want that. This is one that you'll probably adjust fairly regularly, which is this auto reset on stop. So you can turn this off here, and what that means is when you click the stop button, motion will just stop. It won't go back to any particular position. If you have this checked, what it'll do is as soon as it stops, it'll move you back to the starting position. And again, there's reasons why you may or may not want to have that. This option right here is for if you're recording G-code, and we'll look at some examples of where recording G-code can be useful. This will return to a relative position as opposed to an absolute position. Sometimes if we are both pumping and rocking simultaneously, you might want to determine whether or not you're going to reset the pumping direction, which would be the Z direction, or if you're going to reset the rocking direction, which would be the X direction first. So you have a reset priority here. You can switch and you can set which one you want. And this positional Z difference for X scans is for an advanced feature, which we'll look at a later time. All right, I think these are the basics. And so all of these other options down here are specific things for specific features, which I'll jump into when we cover those in the videos.